I was scrolling around YouTube when I saw a video by the creator Pixel JP that went over an upcoming game known as Europa, a Studio Ghibli inspired open world action game that really lives up to its inspiration. The world looks absolutely beautiful and, strangely enough, nostalgic, which is weird. A unique game that many of you have probably never seen, let alone played before, being nostalgic? Is that even possible? What do we know about Europa? What mysteries does it potentially hold? And finally, is it possible to be homesick for a place you've never been? Europa is an indie game created by Helder Pinto and takes place on one of Jupiter's biggest moons, that being obviously Europa. And while there's not a specific reason on why they chose Europa, at least from what I can find, I definitely have my theories. Two of them being, one, it just sounds cool, and the second being the unique fact that Europa's surface is covered completely in ice, which means underneath that ice must lay an ocean, so there's a chance for life. Not just that, but if there's a chance for life, there's a chance to cultivate that life into making a habitable planet. The game is not yet released, so we don't know the actual idea of the full story, but we do know some key points. We play as an android named Z on the moon of Europa. There's no other humans around, and the person that created us, or at least turned us into an android, is long since gone. We know that on Europa, everything is better. The air tastes like water, and the water tastes like wine. The writer of the journal states that it's due to the gardeners that it's like that, saying that these gardeners were originally meant to be tools to help cultivate life on Europa, but had since become like family. Europa also isn't the only planet that humans tried to terraform, yet unlike all of those other planets, the only one to work was Europa. He even states that it's not because of humans that Europa is habitable, but we did awaken something on Europa to make it habitable. And as you're exploring Europa, playing from your seat, from your couch, from your bed, you might feel sad, like you're missing something, like you yearn for the past. Why does it feel so nostalgic? Is it the art, the music, the fairy tale storytelling? Why is it that when you play this game, you can't help but feel lost? Even though you've never been to Europa, even though the real Europa looks nothing like this, why? Why is it that we want to go there so badly? Like some sort of homesickness. The human experience is one of the hardest things someone can go through. Being born, learning to walk, talk, how to communicate with people in order to make friends, how to do simple math, how to write, how to communicate with people older than you. Your first time spending a night away from your family, the first time you find love, the first time you lose love, the loss of a pet, a parent, even a friend. It will happen. It probably has happened to some of you, and it's something that should be remembered. Humans, along with a very small group of other animals, are able to show grief. We know that we exist. We seek out further truths with religion, with fake ideas that we're our own gods, or that the universe centers around ourselves. We do so many bad things, yet we do so many good things. We as people are flawed, and that's what makes us so perfect. And one thing the majority of humans have felt is nostalgia, a warm yet sad feeling from your childhood. Getting home from a half day at school while it's raining, Cartoon Network on the TV, one of your parents is home and made lunch. You get ready to hop on some Xbox 360 and enjoy your 3-day weekend. Something so specific, and yet I guarantee that some of you have experienced it. Nostalgia, a combination of two Greek words being nostos, meaning homecoming, and algos, meaning pain, was coined all the way back in the 17th century and describes a feeling of yearning for the past, or even yearning for home. Even the Japanese word for nostalgia, kyoshu, uses the kanji kyo being one of the Chinese readings, or sato being one of the Japanese readings, which means hometown, and the second kanji being usually read as shu and meaning distress. There's many things that can cause nostalgia. Games, movies, locations, even weather can affect your mind, and there's not an exact reason for it. Christine Bacho, I think that's how you pronounce it, a psychology professor who's been studying nostalgia for over 30 years, stated, consuming nostalgic media of all types gives us ways of thinking about who we are and helps us make sense of our purpose in life. So that's the reason for nostalgia, right? Sadly, no. Another reason stated was nostalgia is one way of coping with things like social isolation or disconnectedness, loneliness. We see this perfectly shown in Europa. Our character, the lone survivor on a moon unknown to him, yet us, the player, know the moon all too well. You see, there's a few reasons I feel like Europa makes us homesick, and maybe a bit nostalgic. You can even say there's a possibility of being homesick for a place you've never been. Have you ever played a game that reminded you of the past? For example, the Spyro the Dragon remake. The graphics are clean and the gameplay is refined, yet I bet anyone who watches this video that grew up in the late 2000s and early 2010s feels nostalgic seeing this gameplay. Even though the original Spyro the Dragon game came out all the way back in 1998. The locations, the gameplay, the story, and the character himself all contribute a huge role into why we feel nostalgic for games and this game in general. For example, a big reason why you'd find Spyro himself nostalgic would be him showing up in the Skylanders games, which took America by storm in the late 2000s, and is probably a big reason why many of you know who Spyro is and why he's so special, even though you've never played his original games. Now we look at Europa. Well, there's not much to go on. As a game, it's fairly modern in gameplay terms, and while there's other games that follow its formula, those games don't give that push for nostalgia that I'm actually getting from the game. But let's dive just a little bit deeper. Let's start at the graphics and art style. Graphics don't make a game, but the art style does help it survive in a world where we're constantly getting better and better graphics, and as of the last 4-ish years, we've been seeing a lot of games, media, and memes popping up showing current games in a PS1 art style. Why? Why do these videos get so many views? Well, it's because the PS1 art style is very distinct. At the times, the devs try to make realistic art styles, but due to the limiting power of the system, we instead have detailed textures slapped onto a less than detailed mashup of polygons. Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, and Silent Hill all share a similar art style that is loved by millions years later. Even through remakes and remasters, many still prefer the old art style. Something about its grittiness, its lack of polish, it fits really well into making the game unique, even though all of these games look similar. We see this in the various memes, like Fortnite PS1 edition. It's very old-fashioned, yet it somehow fits quite well, a more arcadey feel and less complexity. We see it also with the Bloodborne remake, that even with the ear-screeching audio and the pixely graphics, it manages to captivate 1.5 million players. I think something that plays a big part in the graphics is not just the old simple feel of it, but the style itself. There's a reason many people compare Europa to a Ghibli movie, because if you take screenshots from the movies and put them next to the game, it's almost like it could have been from a Ghibli movie. Each Studio Ghibli movie holds a certain style that captivates any watcher, and in 2020 when we got the Earwig and the Witch movie, it's obvious that it didn't strike the same chord that old Studio Ghibli movies did. In 2023, when we got The Boy and the Heron, it was like magic. Suddenly, everyone forgot about 2020, and we got an amazing Studio Ghibli movie that returned to form, striking the chord that showed everybody the reason why they loved the movies in the first place. And it's obvious to not just me, but to anybody that plays, that by playing the game, you almost feel like you're in one of the Studio Ghibli movies. Like the tale that you're telling was made specifically for you, and the way you play it is the way your story gets told. Something about the art is so special, just so nostalgic. Have you ever heard this song before? One of my favorite games of all time, World of Warcraft, may not be seen as the MMO superpower it once was, but in 2010, when I was 6 years old playing the game, Wrath of the Lich King was out, and it was considered to be the best expansion to ever be released. Now, I know I talk about MMORPGs on my channel a lot, so I wonder, how many of you actually feel something when you hear this song? The calmness it gives, back when times were simpler, back when it was about the adventure. I remember the first time I felt like I had a real adventure as a kid. A few friends and I went out to another friend's house, and the walk was a 45-minute walk away. And while I'm 20 now and that's an average journey for me, back when you're 10 years old, that's quite a ways. I remember how hot it was. I remember the giant fight me and my buddy got in when he fell jumping over a fence and how I laughed at him for it. I remember the walk back and how quiet it was when the buddy wasn't even home, and how my friends ended up catching a ride with a complete stranger, leaving me to take my way home by myself. It's not the most crazy story, but it was the first time I ever ventured out to a place I'd never been to. I didn't have a phone, I had no wallet, nothing. I simply went out with nothing but my clothes and shoes, and I had fun. And when I listen to this in Europa's music, I can't help but think back to when I was just a kid, laughing, running around with my friends. It almost feels like it happened just yesterday, except it's been over a decade and I no longer hang out with those friends anymore. So whilst exploring Europa, I start to feel the nostalgia from exploring new heights, new locations, and discovering new things just like when I was 10 years old. With the animals of Europa being neutral reminds me of a time where as a child, you don't understand that the things are out to hurt you yet. So the exploration that you experience is all just natural curiosity rather than a mix of emotions. The music of Europa shows this perfectly. We haven't heard it all yet, but when the title card shows at the beginning of the game, the feels really start to hit you. I can't show you due to copyright, but if you listen to Merry-Go-Round of Life by Joe Hisaishi, a song that was in Howl's Moving Castle, a movie that Europa was clearly inspired by, you'll easily find the similarities to the music. A calm, yet energetic mix of instruments, with an emphasis on the piano and violin. A fantasy. A memory. Though there's no turning back time and only one way forward, this game throws heavy-hitting questions to the player. Is it possible to be homesick for a place you've never been? Yes, we've all had it happen. A lot of us grew up in a time where the air smelled like water and the water tasted like wine. A time where the scariest thing you could do was ask your neighbor to mow their lawn for some money to spend at the local convenience store. A time where the world was more colorful and the rain had a more distinct smell. So I guess the only question for me to ask you would be, do you feel homesick? Oh, and again, thank you for watching.